right, we're on the record. And this is the outcry hearing and defense. It's the court's understanding that you all agree that this witness that is on the stand, and what is your name?
Eric Mata.
Eric Mata is the actual outcry witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
Eric Mata.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Eric, with respect to when your forensic interview took place, do you happen to know when that was?
It was in 2023. I don't have an exact date. I'm
No
sorry.
worries. But you were above the age of 18?
I was, yes.
And she was below the age of 18?
Yes, she was.
And of course, just for clarity's sake, where did the forensic interview take place?
It occurred in Child Safe in San Antonio.
Is that your place of employment?
Yes,
Are you a forensic interviewer?
I am.
How long have you been one for?
I've been forensic interviewing since 2000 and the end of 2017.
And do you know why we're here today?
Yeah, for a criminal trial against the defendant, Mr. Rodriguez.
And did you have a forensic interview with Emily Rodriguez?
Yes,
And in preparation for today, did you have a chance to review that forensic interview?
I did.
And we had briefly spoken just about logistics in getting here yesterday, correct?
Correct.
Now, with respect to your forensic interview with Emily, kind of how did that start?
So anytime a forensic interview is conducted, it's through the request of the investigative party. I don't recall which specific investigative party it was. I know it was either CPS or Bexar County investigator. One of them requested the forensic interview, and we moved forward with it as me as a forensic interviewer.
So when you say you move forward with it, you're talking about moving forward with the actual conducting of the forensic interview.
Right, scheduling and having the family come in and doing the interview and providing services.
So when you're in the room with Emily, how did things start?
In the interview room?
Mhm.
So anytime we begin a forensic interview, we don't really talk about why they're there right away. We'll spend a few minutes just building rapport and getting to know each other a little bit, just to make sure that she's comfortable in the room with me. Once we did a few minutes of that, we went over something that we refer to as an event narrative practice. And the event narrative practice is just a way for the interviewer to gauge the interviewee's developmental level and just to make sure that they're able to give a sequence of events from beginning to end.
And did you kind of take those normal steps and processes with Emily?
Yes.
And after that, were you able to get into kind of the incidents or acts that occurred?
So after the event narrative practice, we do what we refer to as some truth. I'm sorry, we go over some rules in the room. After we went over the rules in the room, we went over what it means to tell the truth, what it means to tell a lie. And then she promised to only talk about the truth, and then we talked about why she was there.
So she affirmed the nature of understanding what's a truth and what's a lie.
That's right.
And that's common practice.
Yes.
So after that, what happened next?
We went into the substantive portion of the interview, which is where we discussed the alleged abuse.
And with respect to the things she was able to articulate, what was Emily able to tell you? Just what was the first thing you remember her letting you know?
We talked about 3 separate incidents of, in her words, her being molested by her father. We talked about the first incident where he molested her. We talked about the last incident where he molested her. And then we talked about the most memorable incident where she was molested by him.
And with respect to the first, what was she able to communicate to you?
With the first incident, she told me it happened when she was 6 years old. It happened in every incident happened in the defendant's bedroom. She said that she woke up to him touching her breasts, and then she clarified that it wasn't really her breasts because she was kind of too young at that time. She was only 6 years old. So she clarified he was more touching her nipples. After he touched her nipples, she talked about how he dropped her pants and her underwear, and he was putting first his penis, kind of in her words, in her crack, and then eventually, after his penis touching her crack, he penetrated her anus. She talked about how she was really scared and she didn't really know what to do. The only reason why it stopped was because she like yelped, and I guess that tipped him off that she might have been awake, and so he stopped at that point.
And what about that was with respect to the first, what about the most memorable?
She talked about the most memorable incident where, again, it happened in his bedroom, and she was very descriptive as far as how she was sleeping in order to prevent the molestation. She talked about how she would wrap herself in the blanket to make it more difficult for the defendants to do anything to her. But she said that he did end up unwrapping her from the blanket and um, penetrating her anus this time as well. And also, he made her masturbate him this time.
When you say masturbating him, what exactly was she able to communicate?
Uh, her hand on his penis.
And with respect to the last time, what was she able to articulate?
The most recent incident, she talked about when she was around 10 years old, again in the defendant's bedroom. She said that she woke up to him caressing her breasts. After he was caressing her breasts, she described him uh, touching the lips of her vagina with his fingers, although she clarified that there was no penetration, it was just on the lips of her vagina. After he did that, he then proceeded to insert his penis in her anus.
And did she remember any sensory details to your knowledge or memory?
Yes.
And what were those?
Well, she talked about the feeling of his hand on her hand, forcing her to masturbate him. She talked about the feeling of his the hair on his genital area, what it felt like against her hand. She described what the bedroom looked like at the time. Apparently, it's not the same bedroom that he would currently be in. It's a different bedroom, and she gave a very descriptive uh, explanation of what the bedroom looked at that time, amongst other details.
Anything about it, something being wet?
Yeah, she talked about how his hand was wet and how he would put his hand on her face after he would make her masturbate him, and how she felt disgusted with his wet hand on her face.
With respect to masturbation, in terms of like the verb, was it movement up and down, side to side? What was she able to articulate?
I believe she said it was movement up and down.
Any other sensory details you remember her being able to communicate potentially?
Uh, Not off the top of my head.
And
She did. Oh, I'm sorry. She did talk about the fear that she felt in the moment of the assaults. She talked to me about how she knew about his history, his criminal history. He had talked to her about the things that he would have to do while in prison, and so she knew what he was capable of, and so that's one of the reasons why she was so afraid to do anything while the molestation was occurring.
did you receive, I mean, you were observing her body language throughout. Or were you able to pick up on her body language?
She was very tense. Her hands were in her laps the entire time, most of the interview, in between her legs. She was kind of emotional towards the beginning of the interview. Throughout most of the interview, she was pretty collected and she didn't show too much emotion throughout the interview up until the end, whenever I stepped out, and she kind of cried again after I stepped out of the bedroom, out of the interview room.
And was anyone else in the room with y'all?
No, it was just her and I.
Standard procedure.
That's right.
No further questions from the state?
Briefly, you've been advised not to mention that my client was in. You have your micro. There. Were you advised to not mention the motion in limine was discussed with you?
I'm sorry, was that advised what?
Not to mention any past criminal history from my client.
I was not advised to do that now.
Do you understand that you're ordered not to raise that issue until the judge gives you permission?
Okay.
Okay. And just to be clear, Emily was under the age of 18 when she spoke to you.
That's right.
That's what is.
No further questions, Ron.
All right. When you're called to testify, you're not allowed to speak about the defendant's criminal history. That is not to be brought up in any way. Do you understand?
Yes, Judge.
All right, you may step down. The court will hear any argument. Defense, do you agree that this is the outcry witness? And do you agree that his testimony should be heard?
Yes, Judge. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
No problem.
Martha, do you mind just spelling your name for the court reporter's purposes?
Yeah, no worries. It's Erikmata.
And Eric, can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Sure. Eric Mata. I am a forensic interviewer at Child Safe here in San Antonio. I've been forensic interviewing since around 2017.
Now, you had mentioned Child Safe. Can you just briefly kind of help them understand what a CAC is and kind of what Child Safe does?
Sure. When he says CAC, what he means is a Child Advocacy Center. Child Safe is a child advocacy center, and there's one in about every large county in Texas. There's approximately 70 CACs in Texas. And there are many things that this Child Advocacy Center does. Mostly we provide services to our partners being either the victims and their non-offending family members, as well as the investigative parties like law enforcement and CPS. My role is to provide services to law enforcement in gathering information to help them determine if they have enough information to move forward with their investigation. And we also provide counseling services, not myself, but within the Child Safe organization, they provide counseling services, educational services, and a variety of other different services.
And I'm sorry, could parties approach, please?
Eric, you had previously mentioned about a bunch of types of services that Child Safe can offer. Yes?
Correct.
Just remind us again, what exactly is it that you do?
So specifically, I am a forensic interviewer. I conduct forensic interviews whenever there is an active criminal investigation happening.
Now, can you help the jury kind of better understand what exactly is a forensic interview?
So a forensic interview, it's a simple conversation with an alleged victim. All we do is discuss any alleged abuse in great detail to help law enforcement determine if they can move forward with their investigations.
Now, as a part of the forensic interview, what types of questions do you ask, or what kind of training do you receive with respect to the types of questions that should be asked?
So to become a forensic interviewer, you do need to go through some very intensive training that is provided by the CAC, the Child Advocacy Centers of Texas in Austin. The training is split into 3 different blocks or sessions. Each session is approximately 20 hours long. So there's a total of about 60 hours of training that you have to complete in order to be like a certified forensic interviewer. The types of questions that we ask or that we are trained to ask are open-ended, non-leading questions. So what that means is that we're not introducing any words or any ideas or really anything to the alleged victim. We're leaving it up to them to tell us whatever is allegedly happening. And a brief example of an open-ended, non-leading question would be, let's say that a child had lunch earlier that afternoon. A leading question would be, you had pizza for lunch today, right? That would be considered kind of a leading question. A non-leading question would be, tell me everything that you had for lunch today. And with that principle is how we got the entire forensic interview.
And is that standard procedure across all forensic interviews?
That's right.
Now, on top of, or I guess I should say, coupled with that theory of non-leading questions, is a part of your training for all forensic interviews, is there any kind of parsing out of truth versus non-truth with children?
As far as the training is concerned?
As part of the training and as a part of your experience with each interview?
So every interview we do go over truth and lies. So we'll have the interviewer will have the child define what it means to tell a truth. We'll have them define what it means to tell a lie. If they don't understand or if they're unable to define it, we'll give them examples. And once they have defined it, we'll do an oath, meaning that we'll have them promise to only talk about the truth. And only once after they've done that is when we'll get into the actual details of the alleged abuse.
And you say we. Child Safe has its own physical brick and mortar structure, correct?
Right. So what I meant by we, I'm sorry, is we as forensic interviewers, as a general practice, is we do.
Absolutely. And who's in the room with you when you're interviewing a child?
No one, it's just myself, the interviewer, and the child. There are investigators present as well, but they're never in the room. They're in a separate room watching everything through a computer monitor.
So within the room, nobody else. Is that for all interviews?
Yes,
But they're, like you said, there's cameras so other people can view that type of discussion. A rapport building, or do you lead in, or do you just start right hard and heavy? How do you kind of do that?
well, we do not start talking about why the child or why they are there right away. The first thing that we do whenever we step into the interview room is we identify the cameras, we identify the microphone, that way that they know that they're there. Once the cameras and that microphone has been identified, we'll spend a few minutes on rapport, meaning that we'll just kind of get to know each other, and have them get used to the types of questions that we'll be asking. Once we're more comfortable with each other in the room and we've built some rapport, we'll go through something that's referred to as the event narrative practice. And the event narrative practice is just essentially having the child go through an event from beginning to end, a specific event, a neutral event that just occurred like a week ago or whenever. And the purpose that we do that is just to ascertain a developmental level, just to see kind of where their cognitive abilities are. And also we do that to make sure that they're able to um, tell a sequence of events from beginning to end. So once we do the event narrative practice, as I mentioned before, we'll kind of get into some of the rules that we get into the room. Once we talk about the rules, we'll get into what it means to tell a truth, what it means to tell a lie, and then we'll talk about the oath, and they'll have them make an oath, they'll talk about the truth.
And you go through great lengths to keep the room safe, kind of, that's the whole vibe of the room, is that fair to say?
Okay.
And what percentage or what proportion of children that you interview are considered delayed outcries?
A lot of them. I don't have an exact percentage, but I would say more than half.
And do you know why we are here today?
Yes, there is an active criminal investigation against defendant Alexander Rodriguez, and we're here for that.
And did you have a forensic interview with a girl named Emily Rodriguez?
Yes.
And about how long ago was that interview?
It was in 2023. I'm not sure exactly when it was.
And in 2023, you, of course, were above the age of 18,
Yes,
and she was below the age of 18.
she was.
So when Emily came to the facility, who did she come with?
She came with her mom and stepfather, I believe.
Was a detective present outside of the room?
Detective was present, yes.
And when Emily and yourself were kind of sitting in this room, how did things start? You briefly touched on it, but just for this interview specifically, kind of how did you begin with Em?
Oh, once we got into like the detail gathering portion of the interview, like the substantive, I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Well, just as soon as you guys sat down in the room, did you go through the normal processes and procedures that you kind of outlined for the jury previously?
Yes, that's right. What I described to you earlier is what we do for every single forensic interview, including Emily's.
And what was Emily, I guess, how did you begin your discussion with respect to the events involving the defendant? How did that discussion start?
Well, through our forensic interviewer training, we try to begin the conversation as open-ended as possible. So for most interviews, the way I start the detail gathering portion of the interview is just to simply ask, what are you here to talk to me about today? And then it's up to them to talk about whatever's going on.
And when you asked her, what did she tell you?
She said that she was here because she was molested by her father when she was younger. Molested was her words.
And after she had notated that she was molested by her father, what did she say after that?
So we discussed 3 separate incidents of him molesting her. We talked about the most recent incident that occurred when she was 10 years old. We talked about the first incident of him molesting her, which happened when she was around 6 years old. And then we also talked about a third incident, which was the most memorable incident for her. So we discussed 3 separate incidents of the defendant molesting her.
When you say 6 years old and 10 years old, those are the age ranges she provided to you
That's right.
through that open-ended question.
That's right.
Now, with respect to the first thing or the first real instance that she remembers, what was she able to communicate to you?
The first, you mean when she was the youngest or the
The
first?
youngest, yes.
She talked about when she was 6 years old, and every incident that occurred only ever happened in his bedroom, in the defendant's bedroom. She was asleep with him in the bedroom, and she would tell me that she told me that she would kind of pretend to be asleep every single time. And so she felt him touching her breasts, and then she clarified, well, I was young, I didn't have any breasts, he was just touching my nipples. So she talked about how he was touching her nipples, and eventually he dropped her pants and inserted his penis in her anus. The only reason that it stopped, according to Emily, was because she was really scared. She was afraid to do anything or to make him stop. So the first thing that she was able to think of was just kind of to yelp, because she was feeling pain. And so whenever she yelped is when he stopped molesting her, this first incident when she was 6 years old.
Was she able to further kind of articulate the nature of that pain to your memory?
Um, she just talked about how it hurt a lot. I'm not sure if she told me exactly how it was hurting. Oh, well, actually, yes, she said that it was hurting a lot and it lasted a long time, was her words.
And you said, he had dropped her pants. To what you remember her relaying to you, were they laying down, standing up?
They were laying down on the bed together.
And with respect to the most memorable time, what was she able to relate to you?
She talked about she wasn't really able to give me an exact time frame, which is common, especially when the abuse is continuous and it's prolonged. But she did talk about how she remembered that it was cold, so she believes it was wintertime. She said that this particular incident was memorable because she was actively trying to stop him from molesting her by wrapping herself in a blanket. That way, it would be more difficult for him to have access to her. However, he still was able to unwrap her from the blanket, and he was touching her breasts, and he again inserted his penis in her anus, and also made her masturbate him. She talked about how he grabbed her by the hand and forced her hand on his penis, and was forcing her hand up and down while they were in bed together.
And was she able to clearly articulate penis, anus, or what was the language that she was using to your memory?
She first referred to his penis as a thing, but it's my job to not just leave it as a thing. We need to clarify what exactly she meant by thing. So I did have her clarify, what is that thing used for? Is there another word for that thing? And she did say it's the penis, the part that he pees with, in her
Okay.
anus.
And was she able to articulate, actually, pausing that for a quick second, just kind of zooming out, what are sensory details?
Sensory details are just anything having to do with the senses. It can be either what you felt, what you saw, what you could hear, what you were able to smell, what you're able to taste. And so those are important details in the forensic interview, because what they do is they help validate whatever it is that they were alleging to have gone through, because it's difficult to just create those kind of sensory details out of nowhere.
And with respect to, Emily, was she able to communicate sensory details to you
Yes.
with respect to this incident?
Yes.
And what did she communicate to you?
She talked about feeling his hand on her hand whenever he was forcing her to masturbate him. She talked about feeling the hair on his genital area against her hand. She talked about how after she was done masturbating him, she was done forcing her to masturbate him, that he then started to caress her face. And she's talked about how his hand felt wet against her face and how she felt disgusted with that.
Did Was there any other sensory details she was able to communicate?
Regarding this incident, not that I can recall.
Now, with respect to the last incident, what was Emily able to articulate to you?
She talked about again it happening in the defendant's bedroom. She was awakened, or she felt him caressing, in her words, her breasts. After he was done caressing her breasts, she said that he then began to touch her vagina with his hand, and then later clarified that it wasn't with his whole hand, but it was with his fingers. And she also clarified that there was no penetration whenever his fingers were touching her vagina. She talked about how it did not go inside the hole, but his fingers were touching the lips of her vagina. After he was done touching her vagina, he then turned her around so her back was facing him. She said that she felt his hand on her sides, and she felt his penis going in and out of her anus at that point. She said that again, she was feeling pain and she wanted it to stop. And so what she did is that she turned around in order for him to stop molesting her from behind. Once she turned around, this is another incident where he then began to make her masturbate him because they were then facing each other at that point. I think that's what happened that incident.
And did she ever articulate to you that she told him something or no?
No, she would pretend to be asleep.
With respect to her demeanor throughout, what do you remember about her demeanor that day?
I think that she was tense and she was anxious. Whenever we first got into the forensic interview and we got into the detail gathering portion of it, she did get emotional. She cried a little bit, but quickly gained her composure, and she was relatively calm throughout the rest of the interview. She did kind of break down again. Before a forensic interview is ended, the interviewer always steps out of the interview room to consult with the investigators. And so just to ensure that there's no other information that's needed. And so when I stepped out of the interview room to consult with the investigators, she then broke down a little bit and began crying again while she was alone in the room. But again, all these behaviors are fairly normal for potential victims such as her.
And did you have any indication that she was forced to be there? Any indication that she was under some sort of external pressure?
No.
And with respect to a child's memory and how they kind of outline the things that they're telling you, how do you, or do you ever see changes in like their demeanor throughout the process?
You mean in the forensic interview?
In the forensic interview.
Yes.
Here, what did you observe though throughout?
Well, kind of like I just mentioned, she was emotional kind of at the beginning. I could tell that she was scared. Whenever she was tense, kind of while we were getting the details of the alleged abuse, her legs were crossed and her hands were between her legs. She was kind of sitting at her hands at some point. She was just kind of obviously tense, which is understandable. It's an uncomfortable situation to be in. But that's kind of what I noticed.
I passed the witness, Your Honor.
Defense?
Good morning, sir. When did you interview Emily?
In 2023.
Are you sure about that?
I believe so.
It surprised you to know or learn that you actually interviewed her October 11th of 2022,
I believe it.
about a month after her initial outcry. Okay. Now, as part of your protocol, did you review the police report in this case prior to your interview?
I don't think so. No.
And did you talk to the detective to get an idea as to what you were questioning Emily about?
Yes, that's part of our normal procedure for every forensic interview.
Okay. And so did Detective Trevino kind of lay out what you should be asking for?
Not exactly, no. So whenever we do what is referred to as a pre-staffing, that's the meeting that we have with the investigators prior to the forensic interview. And so during that pre-staffing, it's really just bare bones information, just what's being alleged, and really that's it. They don't ever have any influence on the questions that we ask. That's up to us.
And no, I didn't ask if they had influence, but was the information that you received from the detective vastly different from what Emily initially outcried to you?
To be 100% honest, I don't recall specifically what was said during the pre-staffing. This was a few years ago, and I've had many interviews since then.
Now, did you ever speak to the initial outcry of the school counselor?
I'm sorry,
Did you ever speak to the school counselor that Emily said she initially outcried to?
did I speak to the school counselor? I did not.
Did you ever speak to her mom?
Yes.
When did you speak to her?
So, if I recall correctly, I do believe that her mom and stepfather was there for the appointment. And so prior to the forensic interview and prior to the pre-staffing of the forensic interview, it is within our standard operating procedure that we do meet with the families as a simple introduction. And so myself and the family advocate on the case, who I do not recall who it was, met with the family and briefly introduced ourselves and explained what the appointment was going to look like. And that's the extent of my meeting with her mom.
Okay. And so her mom and her stepfather were not in the room, but they were in the building.
That's right.
Okay. And they drove her home.
I believe so.
So you talked to all of them, but you certainly didn't call my client, right?
Call your clients.
Right.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay. Well, do you normally make contact with those who are suspects?
No,
So you get the police version of events and you get Emily's version of events, but you don't get the suspects, correct?
right. So we're a neutral party. We do not reach out to the suspect at all.
Now, at the point that Emily was interviewed by you, she knew what the male anatomy looked like, correct?
I would assume so, yes.
Isn't that something that you went over in your interview?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so she knew what the male anatomy looked like, yes?
Yes.
And did you ask her if she was sexually active?
No.
Do you ever ask?
No, not normally.
And when she described Alex's penis, she said it was brown, correct?
I believe so.
And she said it was hairy.
She said it was her.
And then I believe you asked if there was any other details that stood out to her.
Yes.
And she didn't mention anything.
Regarding his penis?
Yes.
I don't believe so.
And then she also told you that she assumed it was Alex because he slept in the bed with her, but never saw him. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if she saw him, but he would talk to her during the incidents.
And we'll get to that. But so the question is, she never saw him.
No, she would pretend to be asleep. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, she did describe an incident where she saw him. She talked about a time where he was attempting to kiss her, and she did not allow him to kiss her, and so she would move her head to the side
Okay.
during the molestation.
Would you be surprised to learn that she didn't disclose that to anyone here when she testified?
No, that's not surprising.
Did she tell you her eyes were open during that incident?
I don't believe we discussed that now.
But you're a neutral part. You're a neutral.
Yes.
Did you ever ask Emily if she was being forced to give this interview?
No, that's not a question that we normally ask.
Ever ask them if they're there by their own free will or if someone is pressuring them to be there? You never asked that?
We screen for coaching. That's not something that we discussed this interview. I don't believe there was any concerns for that at the time.
Did you ask Emily who, after all of these visits with her father, who was responsible for washing her clothes?
No, we didn't talk about that.
Okay. Did you ever ask Emily if she was had any injuries like bleeding?
We did talk about the pain that she felt. She didn't describe any bleeding.
And did you ask about any cuts?
We did not discuss any cuts, no.
What about sores?
Nope.
Did you ask her if she had any bruising?
We did not talk about that, no.
Isn't it true that Emily told you that her father always kept his underwear on?
I don't recall her saying that.
Isn't it true that she told you that she always showered afterwards
I don't remember her saying that either.
and that she would stay in the bathroom for hours after?
She didn't say that in the interview.
Do you recall Emily claiming that she was even sexually abused on a camping trip?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to 412.
I like the party's approach. And defense, you may ask your question.
Do you recall an incident where Emily claimed that she was sexually abused on a camping trip with her father and his family?
There was no discussion of a camping trip during the forensic interview.
Do you want time to review your forensic interview?
I reviewed it this morning.
And you also testified, I'm sorry, Emily also told you that Alex's penis entered her anus and she yelped.
She said it went in and out.
In and out, okay, and she yelped.
Yes.
Didn't she also tell you that another time when she was penetrated, she bit her lip?
I think I do recall her saying that, yes.
Okay, but she didn't describe tasting blood or having a sore in her mouth.
No.
Isn't it true that Emily confirmed Clarissa and Alex were having an affair?
Ejection relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Isn't it true that Emily confirmed Clarissa, her mother, and Alex, her father, were having an affair?
With all due respect, I believe you're confusing something because she never discussed any of the things that you're talking about in the forensic interview. Not the affair, not the showers, not the camping trip. None of that was discussed in the forensic interview.
Okay. I think we're gonna have to rewatch it in a minute, and then I'll keep going, but as you remember, you don't remember those things.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you testified that her hand was forced to be on his penis, right?
That's right.
And that he ejaculated on the blanket?
She did not use that word. She just said that it felt wet.
Okay. And that he cleaned her up with a blanket?
That's right.
Okay. And it was the same blanket every time?
She did not say that either.
She said she was cleaned up every time.
No, she said she was clean. She described one incident where she was cleaned up. She did not say every time.
Then here she also stated that, oh, she told you that he caressed her face and with a wet hand put it over her mouth?
That's right.
Okay. Would it surprise you to know she didn't mention that to this jury?
Objection relevance as to the question of surprise.
All right, the objection to relevance will be overruled.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Would it surprise you to know she didn't testify to that in front of the jury?
To feeling his hand on her mouth? No, I don't think that would surprise me. It does not surprise me.
Did she ever mention a funny smell or anything to do with a smell as far as her sensory details?
No.
And she didn't tell you that Alex would call her name out, right?
No, we did not discuss that.
Okay. And she didn't tell you that Alex would say, "I love you."
She did say that he would say things to her at the time of the interview. She said that she could not remember all the things that she said to her, that he said to her.
And that when he said things, it was in a whisper.
That's right.
Now, Emily also told you that she got her period while at her grandmother's house.
No, we did not talk about that.
You're claiming that you did not talk about her period. Do you have any way to track whether, oh, let me start this. What is a recantation?
It's whenever a child has previously made an outcry of abuse, and a recantation is when they take back the outcry.
Okay. And there is no way for you to track how many recantations there's been in this county, right?
No, I have no idea.
Okay. So you've been doing, I don't know how many interviews have you conducted?
Approximately 2,500.
The 2,500, you have no idea what percentage have recanted their testimony.
I have had recantation interviews. That is something that most definitely happens. I do not have an exact number for how many recantation interviews I've conducted.
I passed the witness.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness excused?
Excuse for the state, Your Honor.
I'm gonna review it over lunch, Judge, so I'm gonna hold on to him for that.
All right, can I have parties approach?